The hospital routine had always been my home, a place where each day was a new opportunity to care for someone, to make a difference. But today, as I crossed the gates of that institution I loved so much, an unbearable weight settled in my chest. The accusation of negligence still echoed in my mind like a distant echo, a cry of injustice that followed me. "Jake, you can't be part of this anymore." Dr. Harris's words resonated like a blow. I knew it wasn't true, but the truth didn't seem to matter within those walls. Walking through the streets, the people passing by seemed so distant, so oblivious to what was happening. The gray sky reflected my mood. The city, once vibrant, now felt like a labyrinth of solitude and despair. Money was scarce, and the bills piled up in a corner of my mind, like a shadow that wouldn't let me be. And now, what am I going to do? I murmured to myself, not expecting an answer. That's when I saw her. Sarah was leaning against a wall, wrapped in dirty blankets, her tired eyes still holding a spark of light. "Hi," I said hesitantly. "Would you like a coffee?" She looked at me with suspicion, but curiosity won out. "Coffee? You are a generous man," she replied, a faint smile forming on her face. We sat down in a small cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. "How did you end up here?" I asked, trying to break the ice. "Life hasn't been kind," she began, her gaze distant. "I lost my parents very early, and somehow I ended up here." Her voice trembled, but there was determination in her words. "And you? What's a nurse doing on the street?" I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I was fired, accused of something I didn't do. Now I'm trying to figure out what comes next." The silence that followed was heavy, but at the same time, there was a silent understanding between us. At that moment, I realized that our lives, filled with pain and struggle, were intertwined in a way I could never have imagined. After coffee, I returned home with a different weight in my heart. The conversation with Sarah resonated in my mind, as if her words were still echoing off the walls of the small apartment I called home. For a moment, I felt inspired by her strength. How could someone who had faced so many hardships still manage to hold on to hope? I looked out the window and saw the city pulsing, full of life, but at the same time, so indifferent to those who were on the margins. "I need to do something," I murmured to myself, determined. Even without a job, there was a flame inside me that didn't want to go out. As I walked through the disorganized apartment, I thought about how I could help Sarah. Surely, there was something I could offer, even if it was just a bit of dignity. The next day, the sun had barely risen when I woke up. The soft light filtered through the curtains, but I was already filled with purpose. I grabbed some clothes I no longer wore and put them in a backpack, along with a few granola bars I had saved. As I left, I couldn't help but think that maybe this was just a small gesture, but anything was better than leaving her alone. I arrived at the shelter where Sarah usually stayed, and upon entering, I was greeted by the sight of several people sleeping on mats spread across the floor. The smell of alcohol and despair hung in the air, but I was determined. As soon as I saw her, sitting in a corner, her gaze immediately met mine and a smile blossomed on her face. "Jake, you came," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. "Of course, I brought some things for you," I replied, extending the backpack in her direction. "I hope it helps a little." She opened the backpack and pulled out the clothes, examining them carefully. "You didn't have to do this, but thank you so much," he said, emotion showing in his voice. "I just dreamed of having a home again." "Dreams are important, Sarah. Never lose yours," I replied, feeling a growing connection between us. "And if you need anything else, Don't hesitate to call me. As we walked together, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. Invitation to a meeting. Luxor Restaurant, 7 p.m. Who is it? Sarah asked, curious as she noticed my expression. I don't know, it seems important, I murmured, glancing at the message again. A mix of anxiety and curiosity washed over me. But for now, let's find a place for you to rest. And so, as we walked, a new journey unfolded before us, full of promises and uncertainties. The atmosphere of the restaurant was oppressive, mixing the scent of exquisite dishes with the muffled murmur of conversations at nearby tables. When I entered, the soft light illuminated the elegant faces around me, but I only had eyes for the familiar figure sitting at the back, Dr. Harris. My heart raced, and for a moment I considered turning back, but curiosity pulled me forward. Jake, I'm glad you came. He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. I felt a lump in my throat. Dr. Harris, I didn't expect to see you here, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you want? He gestured for me to sit, and I found myself pushing the chair back, hesitant. I know our last conversation wasn't the best. I was pressured to make decisions I didn't want to. Pressed? I retorted, recalling the injustice that cost me my job. You fired me, Dr. Harris. That wasn't pressure. It was a choice. I understand you're hurt, and I deeply regret it. What happened was part of a corporate scheme much larger than you can imagine. He took a deep breath, as if preparing for a revelation. I didn't want you to leave, but the board forced me. Why? What was at stake? I asked, intrigued and angry. Money. Power. The truth is I couldn't oppose them without putting my own career at risk. He hesitated, and his eyes grew more serious. But, Jake, I'm here to offer you a new opportunity. The hospital needs you back. Need to think, I murmured, feeling the weight of the offer. The betrayal still burned in my heart, but the idea of returning to nursing, of doing what I love, was tempting. When I left the restaurant, the cool night breeze hit me like a punch to the stomach. However, the sight of Sarah brought me some relief. She was standing outside, wrapped in her worn-out coat, her worried expression illuminated by the yellow light of a street lamp. Jake, you took a long time. What happened? She stepped closer, her gaze scrutinizing my face. I had a conversation with Dr. Harris. I confess, the tension making me hesitate. He wanted to come back to work at the hospital. That's great, isn't it? Sarah smiled, but soon her expression turned to genuine concern. But you're hesitant. What's holding you back? He fired me, Sarah. How can I trust him again? I feel like it would be a betrayal to myself. You don't have to decide now, she said, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. You're the only one who knows what you really want. Follow your heart, Jake. Don't let the circumstances dictate your choice. What's most important to you? I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing her words. Sarah had a way of seeing things that always made me reflect. I just don't want to feel trapped again, like before. Then don't get trapped, she advised, looking into my eyes. You're stronger than you think, and I'm here to support you, no matter what you choose. Those words touched me deeply. The connection I had created with Sarah, this unexpected friendship, gave me the courage to face any challenge. And at that moment, I knew that, regardless of the decision I made, I would not be alone. The decision to decline Dr. Harris's offer weighed on my heart, but the determination to help Sarah find a home was stronger. As soon as we left the restaurant, the sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating our path. The day was clear, but the uncertainty about the future left me restless. Jake, Are you okay? Sarah asked, looking at me with her blue eyes, which seemed to shine even under the harshness of life on the streets. I'm fine, just thinking about how we can do this together, I replied, trying to hide my anxiety. Let's look for shelters and social programs. Maybe we'll find something suitable for you. She smiled, a shy smile but filled with hope. Thank you for being by my side. I never thought anyone would care this much. We began our journey, visiting various shelters. Each place we entered had a different atmosphere. Some were crowded, others seemed more welcoming, but they all had one thing in common: the struggle and resilience of the people there. In one of these shelters, we found a team of volunteers who quickly welcomed us. Jake, is that you? A woman with curly hair and a warm smile approached. It was Lucy, one of the volunteers who had worked at the hospital where I was. What are you doing here? Hi, Lucy. I'm helping Sarah, I replied, gesturing to the homeless woman by my side. She needs a place to stay. That's a great idea. And how are you doing? I heard about what happened. That's so unfair, Lucy exclaimed with a look of empathy. Yeah, it's complicated, but I'm focused on helping Sarah right now, I said, feeling the pressure on my shoulders. If you need anything, I'm here. By the way, I have some contacts at the hospital. I can see what I can do to help you turn your situation around if you'd like, she offered, and the idea of returning to my old job filled me with hope. That would be amazing, Lucy. But what about Sarah? I asked, my heart torn between the ambition to regain my job and the responsibility of taking care of her. I understand, and I can help you find a suitable shelter for her while you get back on your feet. We can do this together, Lucy suggested, her voice gentle and encouraging. Would you really do that? I don't want to be a burden, Sarah said, looking at Lucy with insecurity. Not at all. We're here to help each other, right? Let's find a place that you can call home, Lucy replied, smiling warmly. Those words touched me deeply. The connection we were forming there, among the three of us, was strong and full of promises. We walked together, planning the next steps. Hope, which had seemed distant just moments ago, began to bloom once again. Anxiety pulsed in my chest as the streets unfolded before me, each corner a new hope of finding Sarah. I woke that morning with a knot in my stomach, feeling that something was wrong. She hadn't shown up at the shelter, and the silence that followed her absence was deafening. The city, which had once seemed full of life, now transformed into a maze of uncertainties. Where are you, Sarah? I murmured to myself as I walked along the cold sidewalks. The hours dragged on, and I searched in every place she used to frequent. At the cafe where we met, the kind owner, Rita, looked at me with concern. Jake, have you seen Sarah? I asked, my voice nearly breaking. Rita shook her head. I haven't heard from her since you brought her here last time. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. After days wandering the city, a small light shone when I heard rumors of a woman who resembled Sarah in a park. My heart raced, and upon arriving there, the scene was desolate. She was sitting on a bench, her eyes lost on the horizon. As I approached, I noticed her expression was distant, as if she were trapped in a nightmare. Sarah, I called, almost shouting. She turned her head, and her eyes lit up upon seeing me. But soon the shadow of pain returned. Jake, her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know how to find you. I was approached by some strangers. They said they could help me, but they just left me here. The desperation in her voice cut through me like a knife. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have protected you, I said, the weight of guilt crushing me. She shook her head, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. It's not your fault, Jake. I should have been more careful. I promise I will take care of you. I will never leave you alone again, I assured her, taking her hand. She looked at me, and I saw a glimpse of hope in her eyes. Let's go to a safe shelter. I know a place. You don't have to go through this alone anymore, I said, pulling her to her feet. As we walked together, the city around us seemed more illuminated, as if the promise of a new beginning was in the air. Thank you, Jake. You're the only person who cares, Sarah whispered, and I realized that despite the difficulties, we had found strength in each other. And right there, in that moment, I made a silent vow. No matter what happened, I would never let her be alone again. The hospital lights shone brightly when I first entered after my resignation. It was a mix of anxiety and hope. Lucy had been instrumental in helping me secure this new job, and the feeling of being back in a place I loved so much, even in a new role, was invigorating. Jake, are you ready to make a difference again? She asked me with an encouraging smile. Yes, I am. And not just for what I did before, but for what I can do now, I replied, feeling that life had given me a second chance. The next day, I received a call from Dr. Harris that left me perplexed. He explained that there was an ongoing investigation into the corrupt practices that led to my dismissal. Jake, I know you were treated unfairly. We need you to help clarify things, he said, his voice heavy with concern. A whirlwind of emotions swept over me. Anger and distrust were still present, but the idea that the truth could finally come to light gave me a bit of relief. I will do whatever it takes, I affirmed, deciding it was time to put an end to this story. With the information Dr. Harris provided, I began collaborating with the investigators. The revelations that emerged were devastating. He was involved in a medical fraud scheme much more extensive than I could have imagined. Jake, you need to go to court and tell everything you know, one of the investigators said as we reviewed the documents. It's the only way for justice to be served. The idea of facing my former boss was terrifying, but I knew I had to do it, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been wronged. In court, the atmosphere was tense. Dr. Harris was there, his expression one of disdain, but I no longer feared him. As I testified, every word I spoke seemed to free not just myself, but everyone who had faced injustices in their lives. He fired me to protect his interests. That is unacceptable, I declared, and I saw the outrage on the jurors' faces. Finally, when the verdict was delivered and Dr. Harris was convicted, a wave of satisfaction coursed through my body. Justice had prevailed, and as I looked around, I saw Sarah, who was now a close friend, smiling at me. It was a smile of pride and relief, as if somehow we were in this battle together. You did it, Jake. I'm so happy for you, she said with tears in her eyes. From that moment on, everything changed. We decided to start a small nonprofit organization to help homeless people, a project that would not only provide support to those in need, but also bring us even closer together. Let's make a difference together, I suggested to Sarah. Yes, and let's make sure no one else goes through what I went through, she replied, determined. Thus, our journey of compassion and friendship began, and I knew that together we could transform lives.